FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome. You are listening to the Financial Survival Network. I'm Kerry Lutz, and today is 12/11/19. Well, markets go up, markets go down. This one's been going up for a very long time, for 10 years. It was stalled, finally broke through 28,000. Where is it going to go from here? And what does that mean for gold, the dollar, interest rates, etc.? Our good friend is back with us, Gary Wagner, and you can find Gary at The Gold Forecast. That's FORECAST.com for those of you who've been undereducated by the American educational system and have forgotten how to spell everything. Otherwise, just click the link in the show notes. You'll find it there. What do you think about these topics? Just send us an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. Well, Gary, it's always great to have you back. So what the heck is going on with the markets now?
First of all, it's always great to be back. Good to speak with you again. These markets are obviously headline driven, and we've got, a big day coming up on Sunday as to whether or not President Trump rolls out new tariffs or they're delayed, which is kind of what's moving the market today, is the thought that they will possibly be delayed. Of course, Trump came out, last week and said that he's in no hurry, and he actually believes that it would benefit everyone. I think he meant himself, but it would benefit everyone if, in fact, the Phase 1 agreement is signed after the elections in 2020. So that's quite interesting. But I think that 2019 has been an incredible year. We've seen something that we haven't seen really since the sell-off that began middle of 2011 and then ended at the end of 2015 at 1,043 per ounce. And then that ceiling that came in at 1,370, that was prevalent through 16, 17, and 18. And it wasn't until this year we actually broke above that. And that's exciting news to me in the big picture.
Yeah, so what does that mean for the gold bugs and the gold people out there? Does that mean that we're heading higher, and over what time frame?
Well, the time frame is going to be interesting because, as I said, this is really headline driven. We could see a big spike come as soon as Sunday or Monday, and then we could see the market kind of hover in this area in terms of a technical basis. And I'm almost hesitant to give my technical numbers out, as a headline will change that completely. But we're right below a 50% retracement from the highs at 1920 to the lows at 1043, and 50% comes out to 1481. We are currently trading just below that at 1468. So if we break through there on a technical basis, we should head to about 1500. That's the next minor level of support. After that, it's 1565 and then 1585, because that's a fib number, the 0.618% retracement, 1585 of the long data set, starting from the top going to the bottom.
Yeah, so we hit roughly 1550 and then it immediately pulled back, but it's pulled back to mid 1400s, right above resistance there. 1450 was definitely a resistance point. It stayed above it.
It did stay above it. And that the level of 1453 on my short-term fib retracement, and that's just accounting for the big rally of 2019. It began at roughly 1270 up to 1565. And so 1497 is the 23 percent retracement level. So that's a key level. But again, these numbers are irrelevant if Trump doesn't go through with the tariffs, or if he does go through with the tariffs. And so that's when we'll have to kind of recalibrate.
So whether Trump does or doesn't, we just don't know what's going to be here, because, like you say, headline driven, and who drives the headlines with Trump? I just want to pass along a funny anecdote. Somebody was visiting Trump in the Oval Office, or in the presidential office, which is on the second floor of the White House. And he's got like 20 TV sets up, all tuned to different news stories. And he goes, "You want to see something? Watch this." And he takes his phone and he tweets something out, meaningless. And all of a sudden, across all 20 screens, boom, 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 one after the other, they're covering his tweet, a meaningless tweet that had no substance, that he just wanted to screw with their heads, right? So how do you behave in a market like that?
With great caution, obviously. And that's an incredible story. And it shows you the power of this media aware cycle, and more importantly, how Trump uses tweets. It's the first time a president has used this medium in the way that he does. In other words, it used to be that people would go to the White House and someone would hold a press conference.
Yeah.
Trump would come out and speak, and then you'd get the reaction. He could be eating a hamburger at 6:00 at night and something hits his head and he tweets and it moves markets.
Yeah. And if you're a reporter, he has absolutely ruined your life, because reporters, I know reporters, Gary, they're basically lazy, tending towards alcoholic. They don't want to do a lot of work, and they certainly don't want to work late at night and on weekends. And, there was an article, I can't remember, I think it was in GQ, about how Trump is tormenting the White House press pool because he no longer does news conferences in the White House. He does them in front of the Marine One, which is his chopper that ferries him around. And he seems like he's going places all the time, more than any other president before him. So he gets them all out there. Right now it's winter in D.C. We're at just approaching winter solstice. And he'll leave him out there for an hour, and he's in a conference with one guy, then he goes to the other, then he comes out and he just walks right by them and doesn't take any questions. And you just see that he totally detests them and never misses an opportunity to rub it in their face. And they reciprocate. But the bad thing is that there are people that still believe this news and are moved by it. And that's what it isn't so much you have to be careful. You got to be careful of all the other people that still believe this nonsense and watch it and follow it.
It's an interesting world. And this has been an interesting time for gold as a net result. I mean, I have to think that a lot of what we have seen this year in terms of the rally has been driven by the 18-month protracted trade war. And so people live and breathe on his statements about a resolution. Now it's kind of been Larry Kudlow recently, who's kind of been the spokesperson for the White House. And he can be as nebulous as anyone else.
Yeah, nebulousness. And look, I think we have to agree that the economy is better in terms of, look, I have a friend, she works HR at a major health company. They do business in all 50 states, and she can't find enough workers. All right. This is real. The state of the labor market better than it's been probably in a generation. As far as all the health of the country and all that, I don't know, because we still probably have like 1 million guys working for the TSA. Those people are underemployed at best. We could use them on infrastructure, digging ditches and replacing water mains and fixing roads rather than harassing us and groping us at the airport. So you have to look at the nature, the composition of the labor force more so than just the absolute numbers.
Yeah, undoubtedly, whether you are pro-Trump or anti-Trump, you have to acknowledge the fact that he has really ramped up the economy to a degree that we haven't seen, as you said, in a decade. I mean, we are running on 8 cylinders again. And whether you are pro the dismantling of all the resolutions or restrictions that companies had and how he has accomplished this, he has accomplished a great feat in terms of really firing up the economy. And so you've got to give him credit for that. At the same time, you've got to look at, nobody really reports about this impeachment that's going on because it's quite obvious that it'll pass in the House and not in the Senate, so it will be a non-event. But nonetheless, it depends on the side, what side of the fence you're sitting on, how you're looking at that piece of news in terms of causal effects and potential in the future to either wreak havoc or continue on the path that we're on.
Yeah, and I think the Chinese have come to realize that in all likelihood, he's going to be reelected. And their best deal with Trump is going to be now, not after the election, when he's going to say, all right, you didn't believe in me before. Now you're really going to pay the price. And it's going to cost him a lot more. One thing we got to look at in China is Hong Kong continuing demonstrations with no let up in sight. The Congress passed a couple of pro-HK resolutions. Trump signed them. The Chinese are livid about it. But there's that. And then there's the food situation. It looks like their hog herd is starting to rebound from the Asian flu. But we don't really know that because that swine flu can just pick up at any given time and kill off millions of hogs there. But they're short on food, and it's caused a change in the Chinese diet. And anytime you mess with a population's diet, if you remember that movie, Risky Business, the pimp Guido says to Tom Cruise's character, you never mess with a man's livelihood. Well, that's true.
Right.
But you
exactly.
never mess with a man's diet. That's bad.
Well, you don't take food away from anyone. And the one thing is if their hog herd does revive, then that's going to do something about their need for soybeans to come into China, and we're such a large producer. The thing is that Trump realizes that the longer he holds out, he's got the upper hand. When you take a look at the fact at last week's jobs report, it was anticipated at 185 and came in at 266. Mm-hmm. After the ADP was way off expectations to the downside, we were way off expectations to the upside. And the data coming out of China is showing an absolute contraction in their economic growth. And so when you consider that business as usual is employed all of these people, and we've got truly a different makeup in terms of the working force in America, and our economy is running on all 8 cylinders, and the fact that China's economy is contracting, it says that they need us more than we need them, I believe, is the perception that Trump has in his head. And in some ways, you can definitely make a case for that. And so that being said, it's within his best interest to kind of stall, because the upcoming elections are not that far away. I mean, they're, 11 months away. And the key is that if he can say, I'm the only man that can complete this China deal, it's a fair statement to say that that's not a bad argument at all, because he's the only one that had the ability or the guts, let's say, I could use some other words, but the guts to actually take the Chinese on. No other president has, and it wasn't his problem. In other words, he inherited the trade ramifications that we have been living with China for a decade or more. Mm-hmm. And so my sense is that they have grown into a really strong superpower. And at that time, it really took away from the United States. So what he does is anybody's guess. But if he does delay it, there's a rationale behind it and why he's doing it and what advantages he might have because of that.
Oh, no, I totally agree with you on that, Gary. We're seeing a policy that no one ever believed could work because the U.S. was done for it and China was ascendant. And now we're seeing maybe not so fast. Maybe there's more here than meets the eye. I think it all hinges on Hong Kong, where we go there. So obviously gold's been the leader, silver not so much. Silver's been soft. At some point, they're going to cross trend lines, aren't they?
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next.
Today's show is brought to you by U.S. Gold Corp. U.S. Gold Corp is a U.S.-focused gold exploration and development company advancing high-potential projects in Wyoming and Nevada. U.S. Gold Corp has consolidated a district on Nevada's productive Cortex Trend and is advancing the Copper King project towards production in Wyoming, led by a team of prolific company builders and renowned explorers, including Dave Mathewson, who is directly responsible for several major Nevada gold discoveries. U.S. Gold Corp is well capitalized and has an extremely tight share structure with less than 20 million shares outstanding and trades on the NASDAQ, a major exchange, under the ticker symbol USAU. To learn more, go to usgoldcorp.gold. That's usgoldcorp.gold.
The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
I believe so. We've seen periods this year where silver has, for the most part, as the market moves up, outperformed gold. Like, for example, today, silver's up 0.4%. The gold market is up 0.28%. The dollar is down 0.2%. And so you see that there's a nominal difference of roughly 0.1% between the rise in silver today and the rise in gold. However, when the market comes down, it's more than that. It's almost a 2-to-1 or 3-to-1 relationship where you'll see silver move down 2.5% and gold move down 0.5%.
Right. So they're going to diverge. They're going to continue to diverge, I should say. And that's going to be good for silver at some point.
At some point, correct.
Yeah, we just don't know when, because the next, I guess we finished the first leg or wave, right? If you're an Elliott wave theorist, this was the first wave of gold going up, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, my major count is actually putting us at the year's high, the completion of a major third. The first wave started back in 2018, and the market was trading at roughly, call it 1160 in that area, right about a little past the middle. And from there, it came up and stalled right below the 1370 mark. That was like February of this year. Then it came down to 1270 and then up to 1565. This last move down, I am looking at as a fourth wave correction, which means that at some point, and I believe that we've been on kind of the cusp of that, but at some point we're going to enter that last rally stage, and that should take gold pricing well over the recent high of 65. My numbers are about 1650, and time limit I'm looking at, and this again is a strictly technical approach to a market that's driven by headlines, but I'm looking for 1650 to 1700 by, let's say, the second quarter of next year, 2020.
All right. Well, hey, from your mouth, I think you're probably going to be closer to it than a lot. Charles Nenner, he's thinking towards the end of 2020, $2,500 gold. He called this whole rally pretty well, but yeah, like the technicals. So when you look at the technicals, let's look at the cryptocurrencies. Crypto is like, if you look at the Bitcoin chart, it is a horrid looking chart of a market that is seeking to recoup from being at a major bust. You just draw that trend line down and this thing's going to the low thousands.
Well, Bitcoin is a funny animal. I've got, my son is a big advocate of Bitcoin, and he's been running in tandem a daily Bitcoin article, and he's been using Fibonacci retracement, and it's been key in pointing out certain levels. So, for example, the 0.78% retracement level comes in at about 63.46, markets at 72.20. So he believes that it could easily drop to there. And then there's major resistance at 8,000. But the key is it started out when it came onto the exchanges in December of 2017. And that's when you had that run up to astronomical numbers, about 20,000 per Bitcoin. And kind of like gold, it had a multi-year correction. In this case, only about 2 years. And then the next rise is a lower low than the previous rise because it hit 14,151 is what I'm showing. Mm-hmm. And so it's absolutely been under pressure. And these trends tend to be long. And also, when you look at Bitcoin, the technology about blockchain is absolutely relevant and will really comprise how business is done in the years to come. But as to that cryptocurrency, to me, it's anybody's guess what cryptocurrency takes off. And my personal feeling is it will have to be a cryptocurrency that has been created by a government for it to have some real weight to it. And I always look back, and not that I'm not a believer, I see what I see on a chart, but the key is that he gets all excited that it's going back to this price or this price, and I tell him there's a story about tulips in the 1700s, in which they took the price of tulips, which were originally equal to an onion, and inevitably the cost ran up to where a couple of tulips would equal your home, and then someone came in and realized that that's kind of arbitrary. In other words, the value of Bitcoin is the perception of what the value is. There's no intrinsic value. You can't eat it. You can't use it, I believe, to pay your taxes. And until that occurs, I don't see it as having the longevity that we might see in another cryptocurrency that's either created by the Chinese or the Americans, because they're scared, and rightfully so, that the anonymity to cryptocurrencies inherently creates real risks for governments in terms of watching how money moves.
Yeah. Well, this is it's uncharted territory, but it isn't. I predicted in June of 2017 that Bitcoin was going to crash and crash big. I still expect it to go down to that $2,000 range. One thing that Charles Nenner says is the beauty of watching Bitcoin is there's no fundamentals. It strictly moves on sentiment and on emotion. So in a lot of ways, it's easier to use those cycles to figure out how to get this, how to follow where it's moving.
That's an extremely valid point. Because as I said, my son has been using Fibonacci retracement and coming up with extremely accurate numbers, sometimes even more accurate than the fib levels I look at in gold. And it's because there is no fundamentals behind it. It is simply market sentiment. And as that sentiment shifts, it will run a natural course. And since we're part of nature and nature runs within that kind of rhythm or pattern or cycle, the actual numbers that come in from using Fibonacci retracement seem to be acutely right on.
Yep. And that's because there is no supply and demand. There's nobody in a factory, or in a mint printing out Bitcoins. Yes, they mine them, but basically the supply is the supply. It's not changing. So
correct.
Strictly,
now, and I'm not an expert on Bitcoin. You'd have to ask my son. But if from what I understand, next year, they are actually going to cut the amount of Bitcoins that can be allocated
correct.
in half.
Yes, that can be created, mined using algorithms, whatever. I don't understand how you find this stuff, but somehow they make it, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So really, all of this fun and games, in the end, Bitcoin is the perfect sentiment measure, but only of Bitcoin. It might carry on to other parts of the economy, but I can't see any correlation between the underlying economy, the price of gold, the stock market, anything else, and Bitcoin. I think it is strictly a matter of Bitcoin itself and nothing else. I don't see any markets that correspond to it.
Yeah, well, I would have to agree with you on that. And to me, that's why I kind of stick with the precious metals, because there's an intrinsic value to them. Gold is still the rarest metal on Earth. Silver is still widely used in industry. So is gold to some degree. You can't launch a satellite or build a spacesuit without a gold covering their shields, or the satellite being draped in some sort of in gold. But nonetheless, we have to acknowledge that the stock market has just been dynamic this year, running to all-time highs, and that gold has recovered at the same time. We've got the Federal Reserve meeting, which began today, will conclude tomorrow. And so I think that traders are kind of on hold here to see if the Fed does what everybody thinks, which is no action at all, keeping interest rates where they are. I don't conceive of any scenario in which they would raise rates here. And the thing is, the Fed's going to do what it does, but they are on record stating that they're going to stand pat at this point, and that could go and bleed into 2020. And so for that reason, we could see a continuation, I believe, of not only equities moving to new all-time highs next year, but gold recapturing a lot of the momentum it lost back in mid-2011.
Yeah, excellent point there. Well, anyway, we got to take off now, Gary, but so place where we find you is the Gold Forecast, FORECAST.com. We got a link to it in the show notes. Check out our site, financialsurvivalnetwork.com, and sign up for a newsletter, Twitter feed at Gary Lutz, Facebook page, Financial Survival Network. Gary, we'll talk to you again real soon.
Absolutely. And I do, on one final note, want to wish you a happy holidays, a Merry Christmas if you follow that, or Hanukkah if you follow that. And more importantly, a blessed new year filled with good health and financial education as you deliver like no one else does. I wish you the best, Kerry, and we'll talk to you soon.
Hey, and the same to you, and happy Kwanzaa as well. We celebrate everything. I've got a room with got every religious symbol in the world. The only thing I haven't really covered is Zoroastrianism, because I can't find any holidays that they celebrate. Right. But if you find one, let me know, and I'll celebrate that one too. Appreciate it all. It's always a pleasure talking with you, Gary. You're so knowledgeable, and sometimes you're even right.
That's right. Even a blind squirrel gets a nut once in a while, huh?
Yeah, you got that right. No, but seriously, Gold Forecast, great publication. We appreciate you coming on. Happy and healthy to you and yours. We'll talk to you next year.
You got it. Bye-bye.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.